Yeah, on.
Two twins. Yay, 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 roll. It kind of feels like it's been a long time since we did this. As in like a normal show. You know, we had Mick Box, who was amazing.
Yeah.
How can we not be in a good mood listening to that gent, right? And then we did, what did we do before that? By the way, appropriately for this episode, Nubs is having a meal.
Yeah, definitely appropriate. Although
those aren't marbles in his mouth. I think is it stir fry? Rice, baby? Is that what's going on?
If we were really being authentic, by the way, before I forget, it was Kansas Leftoverture and we had Bill Keith on.
Oh, we had Bill Keith. That's right. Yeah. So now it's just us knuckleheads.
Us turds.
Back to normal. By the way,
turds.
do you remember Rice? Have we talked about Rice Baby on the podcast?
No, but of course I remember it.
So I think that correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you know, Gary, we can check on this, I'm sure, but wasn't that like a Detroit radio thing? Or was this like a national thing? It was local. Yeah. It was 96.3, I want to say. Yeah. I feel like the radio station did it. It was a, Nubs has chopsticks and a little bowl and he's just shoveling. What is it? Sushi or something?
California roll.
Yeah.
If I was really being authentic, I would be eating Meat Loaf right now.
Yeah, I know. And some potatoes and carrots and stuff.
Yeah.
So this radio station, I believe, came up with this song parody. It's like a Weird Al style, but certainly not Weird Al, of Rice Baby. And it's great. They talk about like all kinds of like Chinese food and stuff. And, you know, it's a classic. Can you find that still? Let me see.
Well, it's interesting because now archiving is part of what everybody does. Right. But think about the miles and miles of content from local radio shows, you know, things that people grew up with and listen to every morning, where these classic bits, I don't know whether they're archived or not.
Yeah. Well,
and if they are, what are you going to do with them? You know?
Here we go. This is it.
Rice, baby. All right, stop. Grab a table and a menu. Ice is back in this Oriental venue. Hungry for a little chop suey. You got some dim sum, bring it right to me.
You know what you want?
Yo, can't decide. Column A, column B, I like fried. Shrimp and spare ribs, my fingers I'm licking. Waiting for the main course, kung pao chicken, spicy.
Oh, that's what I remember.
Yeah,
that's the line. Yeah,
spicy. Yeah, it goes on. It goes on. But
I would never get played today, by the way. You know?
Yeah. Now it would be
it'd be deemed not
racist or something.
Yeah, not appropriate.
Right. Well,
but what I was saying was that, you know, think about just local Detroit radio. There were these legendary morning shows. And if they would put together a compilation of some of the best bits of that era, I think it would sell, you know, and I'm not saying like on a CD or something, but you just wonder, were these things archived? And, you know, if so, are they hanging on to them to try and at some point take advantage of the market? But, you know, that's what we were listening to before Howard Stern came along.
Yeah.
Was local morning radio.
Well, you were part of it. You did the internship with the Dick Burton show.
Yeah.
And they did a lot of great bits. I mean, they were pros, you know, they were pros and they had great characters and you spent a whole summer with them?
I did. Yeah. And I mean, the advantage of that was it was such a big show. It was one of the top 3 morning shows
on the oldies station, right?
The whole market. Yeah.
Yeah.
The advantage of that was that, every year they would do a CD of the best of the year.
Yeah.
And that would be released. It was a fundraiser for, I think, you know, Mr. Burton's Foundation or something. They'd release that. And so it's this nice archive, this nice yearly snapshot of some of the best bits of the year. But smaller shows that didn't have that luxury, you know, I don't know how they kept their content. I'm sure maybe their content's just all gone. Maybe it's on tapes somewhere. Who knows?
Well, and again, that's the beauty of YouTube, is, by the way, Dick Burton's still alive. Huh? Nice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
85 years old.
Hopefully relaxing somewhere and enjoying himself.
Yeah. He and listen, we talked with Mick Box, last week about cutting your teeth and touring and, moving all over the world. And those old radio guys were no different, man. They had to earn it, and you're talking about moving from market to market and living in weird cities and cutting your teeth in small stations. And I'm sure Dick Burton was no exception, but
yeah, he worked so hard on that show, and he was an awesome guy too. Just fantastic guy. Yeah. Which you don't always get in radio,
They loved you. I remember we would listen, and what would they call? They had a nickname for you. It was your name and then private investigator,
private eye.
Yeah. Private eye. Yeah, that's
my
right.
first day ever on the air was like my second day of the internship or something. They introduced me, and my real name is, apparently sounded to them like a name of a private investigator. So they ended up calling me that, and then always followed by Private Eye. Yeah.
Nubs Private Eye is what the,
yes, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So you're not really a good radio intern unless you have a nickname,
Right. Well, now we're like way off topic. I mean, how do I possibly, I'm going to pull a hamstring trying to segue this back to tonight's episode. But, I think that, tonight's episode probably wouldn't, I don't know, it's debatable. Interested in your thoughts. Probably wouldn't happen had Meat Loaf not passed away recently. I don't think that, I don't know. I mean, we could have maybe highlighted, there's obviously a couple good choices, two in particular, of albums you could highlight from him or them, because I always include Jim Steinman. But these two guys passing away within the last year, and as we'll get to, they were a marriage. I mean, they were a musical marriage, no question about it. And it's funny, you sometimes hear about these couples that, they get a little older and like one of them passes away, and then a couple weeks later, the next one does too. I almost felt that way with these two guys. Like they were just a match made in musical heaven. And, that's certainly what brought it to my mind, Nub, of let's do an episode talking about this guy and these guys and this whole thing, this whole operation. I'm not sure we would have otherwise, but it'll be interesting.
Well, this album was much more your thing than my thing when it came out. I was sort of into other things, but however, it crossed over in some funny ways too, which we'll certainly talk about. It's a situation where neither one of these two could have done it without the other. Truly. You talk about kind of the musical marriage. And we know that for a fact because there was some Meat Loaf without Jim Steinman, and it was not at all the same. Wasn't even close.
Not too good.
And there was quite a bit of Jim Steinman without Meat Loaf. And I mean specifically as an artist, not as a songwriter. And that didn't work either. Together, though, there was some magic here. I mean, we'll talk more about Jim Steinman. The guy has written some songs that you and I both adore that are not part of Meat Loaf.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But he was like a perfect muse for Steinman, and Steinman was exactly what Meat Loaf needed, because I don't know where he would have gone musically if it weren't for this partnership. So, yeah.
And that happens. That happens in music. You've got, Elton John, Bernie Taupin type stuff. It's like, it just wouldn't have been the same. It just wouldn't have been right. It just wouldn't have been complete. Well, hey, let's see if you got any, what have they called Jim Steinman? I've heard them call him, symphonic rock, theatrical rock, operatic rock, cinematic rock. But hey, bottom line is it's still rock. Let's see if you got any rock in your round and round. All right, Nubbies, what's on the playlist lately, buddy?
2 new ones and 1 not new one. Let's go with the not new one first, which would be Aerosmith's 1989 album, Pump. Sort of would you say little brother to Permanent Vacation? I don't know which one was more successful commercially. I know that I think Pump is a much better record.
Is that the one with Angel on it?
Angel is on Permanent Vacation.
Yeah, those two just are the same to me.
Pump is like what it takes.
Love in an Elevator?
Yeah.
And What It Takes. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Been liking it. It's a fascinating album to go back and listen to now just for production purposes. It is so produced. And I mean that in a good way. I'm a fan of lots of production. So it does not bother me.
What you mean like 44 vocal tracks you think is over is heavy production? Huh?
Singing a track by syllable. Yeah, exactly. Second is a new record by a not new band, and that is the band Cynic, one of the more kind of underrated prog rock, I'd say prog metal bands actually of history. They've had a couple band members leave and die, and it's been really tumultuous, but they do have a new album. It's called Ascension Codes. Pretty amazing musicality there for sure. Easily worth checking out if you're into prog at all. Their previous records are pretty incredible too. So yeah, Ascension Codes by Cynic. And then one last new album would be the new album by Ryan Adams, which is Big Colors. This is getting back to sounding a little bit like a band. I know you're very excited about this.
Yes, I am. I was at the midnight sale for that actually.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's running around for me too. What is spinning around for you?
The first is a box set. Is that okay? Can we allow that or
check with the judges? It's a compilation. Yeah, let's go with it anyway.
We're going to go with it. Okay. Well, it's Find Your Records. And I love all this Latin salsa 70s flavor, Joe Baton and Ray Barretto and Louis Ramirez and, all this stuff. It's Bobby Valentine. It's good stuff. So this is called It's a Good Feeling. The Latin soul of Find Your Records. It is came out on vinyl, which I got, and it also came out on compact disc, which I also got, and I've been enjoying that. The second is the new record from Tears for Fears, and we've highlighted them here on the old podcast here, and we'll be going to see them in May.
Are you going?
Oh yes. It's called The Tipping Point. Haven't heard it yet. I could pretend I could come up with some sort of pretend faux critical review for the sake of it, but I honestly, Nubs, I just haven't heard it yet.
I did listen to the single when it was released.
It's still in the shrink wrap.
Thought it was okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm a huge fan. So
yeah.
But I'm looking forward to hearing it. My vinyl copy has not arrived yet.
Well, and Roland now has like long gray hair and like a giant beard,
And Kurt still looks just like he did in 1984.
That's right. He looks exactly the same. Yeah. And the third is kind of, I've discovered the ultimate, oh, they do that song band, Seether. And this is Vicennial, 20 years of Seether. So it's also a compilation. I'm kind of breaking the rules here, but
yeah, it's okay.
It is the best way to absorb that band. They got a huge catalog. And they are, dude. They're like it's like, oh, I didn't know they did that song. I said that like 6 times listening to this collection,
Seether's really good. That whole collection of Wind Up Records artists from, the early 2000s, late 90s.
Yeah.
There's some good bands in there for sure, man.
Yeah.
They're one of them.
Well, let's talk about something else that experienced some commercial success, maybe a little bit more, just slightly more commercial success than Seether. And that is the work of Michael Lee Aday, otherwise known as Meat Loaf. Was he an artist? Was he a musician? Was he just a singer? Was he a theater performer? Was he an actor? Probably all the above, but certainly a singer. I don't think there's any pretending that Meat Loaf was a composer or necessarily a musician, but a performer and a singer and a very unique and special one. A very inspiring guy. This is a unheralded story in terms of one with his appearance and stature and vocal stylings becoming a rock star. And it took a lot of perseverance and a lot of hard work. And this guy overcame his entire life, health issues and various, life choice issues, and always seemed to kind of bounce back. And what part of what we're talking about today with this particular album is kind of the ultimate bounce back. mean, this guy was in the tank and probably was completely written off as a one album wonder. And of course, I'm referring to Bad Outta Hell, the original Bad Outta Hell, which came out in 1977 and was on the charts, Nub, for 9 years. And it's still today sells about 200,000 copies a year. That's crazy. That's crazy. But it shows the appeal, the usage of this music, and the timeless nature of Bad Outta Hell, the original. It still is the 4th highest selling album ever. Nub, you feel a game coming?
Oh boy. Love a game. It's been a while.
Let's do it. Screw it. Let's do it. And now, the game that everyone is talking about, that I have no title for, no clever title for whatsoever. Here we go with Ken Nubs. Name the remaining top 10 selling albums of all time besides Bad Outta Hell.
Yay. Yay.
What a terrible name for this game. Now, don't you dare pull anything up, because this would be a very easy one to cheat on.
I've never cheated in one of these games, and I won't now.
This would be super, super easy to cheat on. All right? Don't do it.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's a pretty simple game, buddy. We pretty much laid it out there. So, can you name how many of the remaining 9 can you name? Let's go.
All right, I'll try and work from the most, I think the easiest ones down to the non-most easiest ones. So let's start.
You don't have to be fan. You don't have to peacock here.
Okay. All right.
All right. Here we go. Throw them out there.
Michael Jackson, Thriller.
That's one.
And Bad Outta Hell is one of them.
Well, of course. That's the name of the game.
Yeah. All right, next I'm going to go with...
Come on, you're on a roll, Thunderlips. Let's do
Shania Twain, Come On Over.
There you go. That's 3.
You got to think about these like cross-genre things.
Nice.
Next, I'm going to go with... is this on there?
I guess we didn't really establish. You get 3 incorrect guesses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go with Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill.
That barely missed the top 10. So that's your one. That's your one red X. You get 2 more.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe I'll give you more than 2 more.
Gotta be like older stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
Maybe I'll give you 5. Let's give you 5.
5?
Misfires. Yeah.
And if I have it right, the albums have to be from the time where they started tracking this, right? So like the Beatles are not on there because they didn't track sales for the Beatles.
That would be correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, that would be correct.
I don't remember the
I'll help you out. There really isn't anything on the list before 1970.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I got to make some guesses here. I can't just talk it through forever. So let me go with a couple more classics and kind of flick the jab here. So I'm going to guess the next one is Def Leppard, Hysteria.
Def Leppard, Hysteria is not even in the top 30.
Jeez, really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Can I just give you, because you made a great point.
Yeah.
Continue down this idea of crossover,
Correct.
I mean? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And there's got to be some hip hop.
And remember, you get to these levels, you've got to be like moms, kids,
right?
And everything in between got to be into it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
And remember, I'll just throw one more thing in there. Remember that per volume, I mean, nothing topped the 70s. In terms of just pure record sales volume.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. No, that's all. Okay.
Okay. things from the 70s that have really lasted too, because this is comprehensive. So
Correct.
Let's say like Carole King Tapestry.
Carole King Tapestry is not. It's in the 30s.
Jeez. Okay. All right. How about like Boston's first album?
Boston's first album isn't even on the list.
That might not. Did that make it in time? Okay.
You're in the right. You just gotta.
Yeah.
You just gotta take a step back here.
Okay. Okay. Let's go a little newer because I want to test one here. How about Puff Daddy and the Family No Way Out?
Not even in the top 60.
Really? Wow. I'll tell you, I worked at a record store when that album was out, and I can assure you
But
that
again, that's a rap album. These are things that like in order to get to frickin' 40 plus million copies, like it has to have mass appeal.
Yeah.
Mass appeal.
Like Shania Twain, Come On Over. Yeah.
Correct. You nailed that one. I'm not going to give it to you a second time though, but you did. You nailed it the first time.
Yeah, it does cover too.
You're right. Do you want me to give you one just to give you a little taste?
Let me make a couple more guesses here.
Okay.
I mean, you're absolutely right that there needs to be these need to be blockbuster albums. Well, let me ask you this. Is there anything on there that's like a soundtrack?
Yes.
Okay, the Titanic soundtrack.
The Titanic soundtrack is in the 40s.
Oh, okay. God, what other soundtrack would be that big? Okay, let's go back to the 70s. So, Meat Loaf, Bat Out of Hell.
You were right on it, but okay. All right.
Oh, really? Give me the soundtrack. Go ahead and give
There's two. There's two soundtracks.
Wait, hold on. Let me think.
Yeah.
And Titanic's not one of them.
No.
Like, what was another giant movie of the 90s? I mean, was there one bigger than Titanic?
Not movie, but soundtrack.
Right, a soundtrack to a film. Yeah.
Correct. So in other words, the movie may not have been as big as Titanic, but the soundtrack was.
I mean, there were some big soundtracks. Like Reality Bites sold a crap load, but that wouldn't be on there.
All right, let me give you a couple just to wet your whistle here.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to give you one of the soundtracks because you're freaking dancing all over it. That's The Bodyguard.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then I'll give you one other just because I think this will get you going a little bit, and that's Rumors.
Oh, yeah. Fleetwood Mac. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see if you can
like
get
that kind of level. Yeah.
There's 6 left. Well, without Bad Out of Hell, there's 5 left. Let's see if you can get 3 of the 5.
Are any from the 80s?
One barely.
Yeah, I have to imagine that the 80s was not
barely.
Yeah. So Fleetwood Mac, Rumors, like that.
People started watching MTV in the 80s, you know? They stopped buying stuff.
Yeah, that's true. So it's got to be really dominated by the 70s. Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon?
Yes, that's there. Good. Now, let me give you another hint. There are 2 from the same band.
2 from the same
Good job
band.
on Dark Side. There are 2. There's 4 left, and 2 of them are from the same band.
I wonder if there's another Floyd album. That wouldn't be. No, not The Wall.
You got 2 from the same band, 1 classic rock gem, and a soundtrack left.
Oh, there's a second soundtrack.
Yes.
From the 70s.
Yes. You got to get this.
Huge soundtrack from the 70s.
At least, listen, I will give you this. At least we know you're not cheating.
Listen, I've never cheated. I would never cheat on one of these games. Soundtrack from the 70s.
All right,
Caddyshack? No, I'm just kidding. That was 1980.
Right. All right, I'm going to give it to you.
Just give it to me, man.
Saturday Night Fever.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The two from the same band are the Eagles.
Yeah, and one of them's Eagles' greatest hits.
Correct.
Yeah, because that was number one for a long time.
And the other is Hotel California. Okay, so you have one left, and it's from 1980. And this is number 2. 50 million copies.
Number 2 from 1980.
Yeah.
What genre?
Classic rock.
From 1980 that sold 50 million and I'm missing it?
Yes.
I mean, I guess it's fitting. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, man. Just give it to me. Oh, really? Wow.
Come on.
So Mutt Lange produced 2 of the top 3?
Well, he produced Shania and he produced Back in Black.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Shania was 10th.
Oh, I thought you said that was 3rd.
No, The Bodyguard is 3rd.
Back in Black is the number 2 selling album of all time.
29.5 million certified.
That is so hard to believe, man.
50 million claimed. Yeah, I know.
I would never have guessed that.
Yeah.
I tell you what, though, that's an interesting study. I'm glad we did that game, even though I sucked at it. Because
you did.
That is such a microcosm of the music industry. You know,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that tells a whole narrative there. You could write an essay on that list.
Yes, it does.
Wow.
Well, back to meat. Let's get back to the meat here.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned from the top, Jim Steinman and Meat Loaf both died within the last year. They say Meat Loaf cause of death was COVID, but he had terrible health. I mean, he was collapsing and fainting and walking with a cane, and he had asthma and he had air condition. I mean, the fact that he lived till 74 was probably a miracle based on what this dude put his body through. And Jim Steinman, same thing. He had a couple strokes and officially died of kidney failure. But, 2 strokes and deteriorating health kind of led to that more than anything. One of the cool things about Meat Loaf is that he was very outspoken. He really thought for himself. He didn't get into the kind of like Hollywood thing or this is what a musician or an artist is supposed to say thing. Whether it was political or whether it was tied to climate change or even more recently talking about COVID lockdowns, he was always very outspoken and really sort of stood up he seemed like a very alpha person to me, like kind of stood up for what he thought and what he believed and wasn't gonna, didn't really care if it hurt his career or hurt his perception or anything. He was more than happy to kind of tell you how he felt about something. And, there's something kind of cool about that. He really struggled with social anxiety his entire life. He had a pretty tough childhood. He weighed in at 240 pounds in 7th grade. So big person. And, I think part of this aggressive singing was probably a dude who felt like this was the way he could communicate. This was the way he could connect. And even up to late in his life, just hated, despised, and tried to avoid social situations as much as possible. You can tell a little bit of that if you watch the Celebrity Apprentice stuff that he was a part of. You could sense that a little bit, but an interesting guy in that regard. Probably one of those guys that when he was performing, he was at his most comfortable. The follow-up to this, Welcome to the Neighborhood, did pretty well, but really it's about tonight's album and sort of how it relates to its predecessor. Why don't we get into those nerdy deets, Nub, and let's dig into it.
You want some dirty deeds? Yeah. You want some dirty deeds?
All right, buddy. Bad Out of Hell 2. Back into Hell. Lots of hell going on in that title, yeah? Was released on September 14th, 1993. It was on MCA. Meat Loaf was working for MCA. And internationally, it was released on Virgin. This was Meat Loaf's 6th studio album. Really, I would say the third that Jim Steinman really had a strong hand in. These guys kind of worked in and out of each other's lives at various moments. And, Meat Loaf took a pause and actually worked with some other producers and some other composers. And Nubs, to your earlier point, never seemed to quite go as well. But this was the true sort of reconnection of these two for a full effort, which was part of, I think, where it led to sort of it being the successor to the original and the sequel to the original Bad Outta Hell. Number 1 in the US, UK, and Canada, sold 14 million. So, a huge commercial success. There's no question about it. The album before this, Nubs, speaking of other producers, in 1988, was called Blind Before I Stop. Do you know who produced that and had a heavy hand in that along with Meat Loaf?
Geez. No, I don't.
I'll give you a hint. It's a producer we've talked about before on the podcast.
Ooh, what is it?
A German fella.
Oh, Frank Farian.
The great Frank Farian.
That's right. I remember talking about that during the Milli Vanilli episode. Yeah.
Yeah. He was actually, he really spearheaded that previous record from Meat Loaf, which didn't do great. And this was, Milli Vanilli was just a twinkle in Frank Farian's eye at that point. That was a couple of years before that whole thing came together. There is no Meat Loaf without Jim Steinman, as we sort of previously mentioned. Now, here's what's interesting. I didn't really know this until digging in. Jim Steinman, after Bad Outta Hell, he toured a little bit, but he was more of a sort of studio composer type guy. And he had been sort of working on the follow-up material after Bad Outta Hell throughout the late 70s and had come up with a couple handfuls of songs and apparently had set to meet up with Meat Loaf and the remainder of the band. And they were playing a gig in Toronto. After the gig, they were going to start rehearsing this material for the follow-up. Jim Steinman showed up with a lyric book and some songs composed. And during Meat Loaf's performance, somebody broke into the dressing room and stole his lyrics. So somebody ran off with his notebook. And basically these songs, and you know how lyrics were very important to a Jim Steinman composition, these were just gone. And apparently also Meat Loaf was in pretty rough shape. His voice wasn't in good shape and he wasn't in good shape. So they basically kind of said, we can't really rehearse this stuff. And the project sort of got shelved, but Jim Steinman actually took 4 songs that appear on tonight's album, that appear on Bad Outta Hell 2, and recorded a solo album in 1981 called Bad for Good. So Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through, Lost Boys and Golden Girls, Out of the Frying Pan, and Wasted Youth, which was originally called Love and Death and an American Guitar on this record, were all recorded in 1981 by Jim Steinman for a solo album. It didn't really do that well. Kind of a weird way that this all, sort of came about. For the record, this is kind of interesting. There's a song on that record called Stark Raving Love, and that the riff in that was used as the intro for another Jim Steinman composition, Holding Out for a Hero. So there you go, which is from
Mad Max. Footloose.
Yeah.
We Don't Need Another Hero was Mad Max. Holding Out for a Hero, Bonnie Tyler.
Got your heroes confused there. Yeah. Obviously, Jim Steinman, and you made this point earlier, Nub, had some very successful composition aside from Meat Loaf. He wrote Total Eclipse of the Heart, made famous also by Bonnie Tyler. He must have liked Bonnie Tyler, right?
Made more famous by the Dan Band.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Good call. It's All Coming Back to Me Now, which was performed by Celine Dion and later covered by Meat Loaf on Bad Outta Hell 3, I believe. And then, of course, a wonderful song that we both love, and we talked about it on the Barry Manilow episode, that being Read 'Em and Weep, which was first recorded by Meat Loaf in 1981, wasn't a hit. Manilow did it. Jim Steinman reworked it a little bit for Barry. Huge hit, and really one of the best songs of the 80s, in my opinion.
One of my favorite songs of all time. And I wish that Barry would have worked with Jim Steinman again. That would have been a great partnership. But, Steinman was off to other things. And I wonder if Barry enjoyed that process or if he enjoyed that song, but it's easily one of Manilow's best.
Jim Steinman's funny. His songs became commodities in so many ways. I mean, he was not afraid to try his songs anywhere. And in fact, 2 of the songs on Bad Outta Hell 2 had already been recorded by this girl group that Jim Steinman was trying to make famous. Meat Loaf was pissed, apparently. He's like, you didn't tell me these 2 songs, you were going to record them with somebody else while we're sort of working through them. I mean, so I don't think Jim Steinman was afraid to sort of mix and match his songs with different artists or put them where they needed to go to get a hit, and I think one of the things that's clear from his composition is that it does demand a certain kind of voice. I mean, there's a reason Read 'Em and Weep wasn't a hit for Meat Loaf, but it was for Manilow. And there's a reason why Celine Dion's version was really, really good and really strong. And, the other cover versions and Meat Loaf's version wasn't as good. Right. It's an interesting, this theatrical nature to his composition almost feels in a lot of ways like a Broadway composition where a lot of it just depends on the singer. A lot of it depends on the vocal treatment. These guys had a rough time through the 80s, and this musical marriage we talked about was going through a rough patch, legal battles and all kinds of stuff. But, they came together really for this project. Now, one of the things that's really compelling, I think, about this Nubs is while some of these songs have lived on and we'll get to them, this is 1993. This is grunge. This is rock. This is minimalism. I mean, people, were figuring out, how Nirvana was going to top the charts and Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots and Soundgarden and all these things that were really performing in a strong fashion within the industry at this moment. And people started hearing about Meat Loaf and Jim Steinman working together on Bad Outta Hell 2, and they thought it was a joke. And it was kind of like, really? Like right now, they really think that's going to sell and that's going to play and that there's an audience for that. And it's just yet another perseverance story here of like this guy, this alpha dude who just sort of doesn't give an F saying, yup, we're going to go for it and we'll see what happens and let's go. And obviously, a lot of people were proven wrong by the success of this.
They certainly were. I think the year of the album's release is so significant. You touched on it. 1993. Just put yourself in the context of that. And the contents of this record, and we'll get into it in the track by track, are just so distant from what was really happening, out on the street, if you will, in rock music. And that's probably exactly why it worked. It was everything grunge wasn't in every single way and became wildly successful. Now, a huge hit single will do that for you. I can't wait to talk about the opening track.
Right.
It's still going, by the way. The opening track.
Right.
But yeah, 1993, big part of this story.
Well, and I think it'll be a big part of our wondrous stories. Let's go with it. All right, this will be fun. I bet we have similar things and similar excursions in mind here, but why don't you start and we'll see where it goes.
Okay. Do I have to? Well, I guess 2 major things with Meat Loaf. One is we were record store kids by 1993, meaning that was our second home, right? It's sort of the place we wanted to be. If we were not warm and snug in our beds, we wanted to be at Repeat the Beat in Plymouth, Michigan. With that said, we had great familiarity of records, of albums, of covers, sleeve designs, of, when you go through the M in the CD racks, how can you miss Meat Loaf and how can you miss Bad Outta Hell? So I can just be straight up with you, T. I had awareness of Meat Loaf. I had awareness of Bad Outta Hell 1, but really never heard it. I really didn't. And you could have told me Meat Loaf was heavy metal and I would have believed you. And you could have told me Meat Loaf was country and I would have believed you. I would have had no idea. I just knew that this Bad Outta Hell thing was wildly successful and had a cover with like a motorcycle and whatever on it. Orange. I remember it was orange. It was one of those artists that you knew of, didn't know much about, at least in my particular situation. And so when there was like a new Meat Loaf album, there was a little bit of intrigue, but it was all about the song, and this song just exploded. It was played all over the place. And the ambiguity of the lyrics was rather appealing for a 13-year-old lad. And so that was one part of it. It was just like this awareness of this Meat Loaf guy must have been incredibly important. And somehow we end up in those magical summers of 92 and 93 and 94, where we wanted to go to every concert at Pine Knob Music Theater, but couldn't drive. We somehow ended up at the Meat Loaf concert being taken by my sister's babysitter, which was not a good idea at this time by my
or was it? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And so I remember being there and thinking, oh, this is an event. It was packed. I remember it was very well attended. But that show was memorable, shall we say? Maybe more.
Why is that?
Maybe more for me than you.
Why don't you tell our listeners why that was memorable?
No. So,
well, I know it was memorable for me because, well, I guess for all of us, because said babysitter, and we were like 14.
Yeah.
Made a little pit stop on the way to Pine Knob and purchased us some Zima.
That's right. The Zima.
We didn't even like ask for it. She just like stopped and just got a bunch of Zima. And did we do the Jolly Rancher thing?
I don't think so. I don't think we took it that far. But T, remember,
just took it straight up.
Before there was White Claw, there was Zima.
Correct. Yeah. Now it's like the cool thing to do. At the time, we didn't care. We were 14 and was like, we get to drink. This is amazing. And I think it was the first time that I was like drunk was this Meat Loaf concert. And we had a buddy with us. It was
your first time, but it was let's say it was one of the early times.
Oh yeah. One of the first three, I would say. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. We made a pit stop, got some Zima and
car full of Zima.
And all was great until our dad found out.
Yeah, then all was not great.
And I think to this day, you told him, didn't you? See, I was pretty good at getting away with stuff. Nubs was not as good. Nubs was not. He was easy to sort of getting you to fess up to stuff was pretty easy.
So
he cornered you.
I absolutely did not tell him, but I got cornered.
Yeah, yeah. He was good at that. He's good at that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not good at lying. I can't do it. So it was. Yeah, I was cornered. He had intel. Let's just put it that way.
He did have intel.
He had intel
he has later reveled to us that he had some intel on this one.
There's no doubt he had intel.
But instead of asking me, he went right to Nubs.
Well, he knows what you would have said. He didn't want to put you in that position.
Right. Yeah, we got caught and it was not pretty. But
and I gotta admit, I've never since then really got into Meat Loaf.
I was gonna say you never since then got into Zima again.
Yeah, just White Claw.
Yeah, right.
Aside from Bad Out of Hell 3 came out is when I was reviewing music. I did a review of it. I thought it was a good album. There's a song on there called Alive. If anyone wants to hear it, just look up Meat Loaf Alive.
Yeah.
It's like one of the best songs of that decade. It's this huge, powerful rock anthem.
Kind of a hard charger. Yeah.
Yes. I listen to it all the time.
Well, that was Desmond Child produced Bad Out of Hell 3, but did Jim Steinman write Alive?
No, I don't think so. No. I don't think Jim Steinman had anything to do with Bad Out of Hell 3, but you can look it up. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, it was. He was definitely all in with Desmond Child, who had some similarities. Do
you have anything to add? Well, I mean, you bought Bad Out of Hell 2 and you listened to it a lot. You loved the opening track.
That was I didn't really listen to the album a ton, but I went through a phase where the opening track's 12 minutes, and I had it sort of timed where like I could get out of the shower, put the song on, and I had it timed where I could like get dressed and like brush my teeth or whatever the hell else I did. This is like high school, junior high school. And right when the song ended, I was like out the door. So there was like a year probably where I played this entire track every day. And it was like, I liked it, but it also kind of just served as this, like, it sort of got me going. Like it's an upbeat song. It's a song that changes a lot of direction and all that, obviously, but there was something about listening to that long piece every morning that I just really liked.
You know what? You did this though. This was one of your moves. People should know this. You had this like thing, and the song would change from time to time. You had this move where you would listen to roughly the same song. It was like your timekeeper too.
Yeah.
But you'd listen to the same song every morning. It wasn't the same song for 4 years, but you would listen to pretty much.
Alice in Chains would. But I think I would listen to that like 3 times in a row. Right.
Yeah. Well, you can listen to that 3 times in the space that it takes to listen to I Would Do Anything for Love, but I won't do that.
Correct. The other thing we really should, and we've talked about Hell's Bells, the dangers of rock music before on the podcast. This is the Christian VHS tape that sort of tells you how evil rock and roll is. And they're talking about the El Coronado, that symbol that you make with your index finger and your pinky with the rock and roll thing, right? And they're saying that that's actually an evil, like satanic symbol, right? To do with your hand, So they're highlighting people doing the El Coronado, and they're making it seem very, it's like these are the evil people out there that are flashing this satanic symbol or whatever. And it's Rick James, Meat Loaf, and Meat Loaf's doing the El Coronado and sticking his tongue out. And it's so funny. It's such a great picture. And then who are the others that they say, it's like, I don't even remember. I don't know.
Just remember that Rick James, Meat Loaf.
Yeah. Right. So that's always a good one for us,
because Meat Loaf was so satanic,
Yeah.
So is Rick James.
I always think too, one other thing that always makes me laugh is I don't know if you remember this, but Barack Obama, when he was president, would do the, what's that thing where they roast the media, the
White House Correspondents' Dinner. I know what you're about to say. It's great.
Yeah. Correspondents' Dinner. And this was actually, Obama was making fun of Trump. Trump was in the audience, and because they had been talking about Trump wanting to run for president and all this. And Obama was always very funny during this Correspondents' Dinner. He had great timing, great delivery. And I remember he was basically like pointing out the hilarity at the time, which obviously Donald Trump got the last laugh here, but the hilarity of the time of Donald Trump wanting to run for president because he was just a TV guy at the moment, He's a guy who's bankrupt all the time, and he's just a TV guy, right? And so Barack Obama was kind of making fun of Donald Trump for, I think he was saying something like, and these are the decisions that keep me up at night. Like, he was like talking about like the competition, the Omaha Steaks competition. And he's like, and he says something like, would it be Gary Busey or Meat Loaf? In that Barack Obama kind of delivery. Yeah, it is great. I always love it. He said, or Meat Loaf. Yeah. That was maybe
totally.
But, because there was a hilarious season of Celebrity Apprentice where it was like Gary Busey and Meat Loaf and all these other bozos. I mean, it was great television.
Hey T, while we're at it, do you like Meat Loaf, the food?
No.
Yeah, me neither. I think it's terrible.
I don't even know what it is. Like what's in it.
There's like a variety of things in it. It's like a big old slab of meat, and then you like basically marble it with all sorts of junk. Yeah. In theory, Mrs. Nubs always says this. She's like, in theory, you really should like Meat Loaf because it's a big old thing of meat, gravy, and potatoes, and
there's like ketchup in it or something.
Yeah. But it's not.
It's sort of like one of those things where like the sum of the parts, you'd think that you like everything that goes into it, but when it's all amalgamated together, it's terrible.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, now we've covered off.
Are we ever going to get to track by track?
We talked about. We went from the Correspondents' Dinner in Washington to do you like a nice hearty plate of meatloaf? Right? So,
see, do you want to just talk about one track?
Yeah,
in the pod, and then be done with it.
Let's get to the track by track, buddy. When the drum beats go like this. All right. Well, hey, we kicked this one off with something that was just a massive hit. It certainly was a comeback effort for these two gentlemen. And, one where people that heard it on the radio or people that saw it on MTV weren't really getting the full experience here. Of what the rest of us that actually did go through track one on this record we're getting with the 12-minute extravaganza, Anything for Love. but I won't do that.
That's just one and only promise I can keep. As long as the wheels are turning, as long as the fires are burning, as long as your prayers are coming true, you better believe that I would do anything for love. And you know it's true, and that's a fact. I would do.
Really, really good high gain guitar there that I think just brings it wide open. And I mean, listen, it's 12 minutes. It's really difficult to sort of find the right piece because there are a lot of different moves taking place. I think it's a verse and a chorus too long, but it's kind of part of what made it what it was, right? I mean, these guys weren't going to come out with some sort of medium in terms of majesticness single, and that's not the way Jim Steinman rolled. And I don't think that was what they really wanted to do in setting the tone here for this record and for this single. So I don't ever listen to it and say, okay, I'm really sick of this, because I think there's always it's a very adventurous song. And I think one that's pretty timeless and still holds up extremely well. They probably could have chopped a minute and a half or so out of it and been fine. But no, I think it works. I still think the epicness, the theatricalness of it still plays. And I think this is a song that really holds up well.
So I have a lot of thoughts. So does this song. One of the cheapest criticisms that one can give about anything is that it's too long. I try and avoid that in my life in all sorts of areas. I work in the communications business, and a lot of times people say, "Oh, that message was too long." Everything's too long, and I just don't even think that's a good criticism because, JFK's 3.5 hours. Is it too long? No, because it's amazing and it's captivating and it keeps your attention the whole time. So, I never heard Gone with the Wind described as too long. I've only heard it described as this classic film that everybody should see before they die.
I think that one's too long.
Right. So, but I guess that's my point to you, is that like too long is totally in the eye and ear of the beholder, because it's only too long for you because you quit on it or you don't have the attention span or whatever. Maybe you just didn't like it, all of which are fine. I want to get away from the too long bit and just focus on some of the key areas. The piano intro is incredible. It's very, very grand. It's got a nice little walk up and down, sets the stage. Meat Loaf's vocals enter with great atmosphere, and then it builds and builds and builds. And in the clip that you actually played is one of the best builds that we have. It is when that electric guitar comes in. And let's be honest, that guitar tone does not work for most of the album, but it works very, very well on this song. In fact, this is the best sounding song on the whole record, far and away. It's got the best space. It's got the best dynamics. The drums are huge. The guitar, the blazing kind of 90s guitar thing works. And Meat Loaf is singing his heart out. It does repeat the main hook more than I wish it did. It goes to the well too often. But right at the moment where you think, oh, this again, then they bring in the chick singer who I remember who it is.
That's an interesting point. It actually, so Patty Russo was his longtime touring female vocalist, long time. And the vocals on the record are done by Lorraine Crosby, who was originally laying down a dummy vocal because they were looking at having like Cher or Melissa Etheridge or a couple of sort of big name vocalists do this part. And the more they listened to Lorraine Crosby's dummy vocals, they basically called her a few months later and said, "Can we just keep your vocals?" So it was this weird, it's like it wasn't his touring vocalist. It wasn't one of these A-list vocalists they were looking for at the time. It was this sort of more unknown who, was basically laying down a frame track for whoever was eventually going to sing it, which is kind of interesting.
That is interesting. Now, do you know who toured with him the show we were at?
Yeah, that would have been this Patty Russo who was on tour with him for like decades.
Okay, good. Well, I would rarely say this, dude, as a progger. Very rarely say this. I think I like the radio edit better than the album version, but I do like the album version just for what it stands for. So really important song of the 90s, a very, very unlikely hit, very unlikely. And T, it begs the question, what is that?
Yeah.
What is
we never found out what that was. I kind of thought this might be like Meat's like Rosebud moment, like maybe he's like on his deathbed and like he'll finally tell everybody what that is. But
yeah. And it's something stupid like put cream cheese on my bagel or something.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Open the car door for you,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we never really found that out. But it's it's obviously the video series from Bad Out of Hell 2 is really interesting. These were all Michael Bay directed videos, which they did one for this. They did one for Rock and Roll Dreams Come True. And then they did one for Objects in the Rearview Mirror. So they had this sort of trilogy of almost films done by Michael Bay tied to these songs. And obviously this was a huge video, this sort of Beauty and the Beast, concept. By the way, on the female singer thing, the other thing that's interesting is the person in the video, the chick in the video was just lip syncing. She was like an actress. So you had multiple, ins and outs here going on with this female vocal part. He won the Grammy for Best Rock Performance Solo. This was number 1 in 28 countries. The top single in the UK in 1993. This was an enormous song. So, well, hell, shall we press on? I mean,
what do you say, Al?
Like, should we call it a day? Or, most people probably think the album's done at this point, but, I feel like maybe we should keep going,
I mean, are there more songs?
Right. All right. This is track 2. This is called Life is a Lemon and I Want My Money Back. All right. So here's the thing. If Devin Townsend did this song, you'd probably love it. Yeah. So the question is, are you thinking of this as like through the Meat Loaf lens and it's silly? Or are you kind of saying, wow, there's some neat moments here. And this is kind of a cool 8-minute, not really proggy, but certainly for Jim Steinman, a bit more of a riffy kind of rocker here in track 2. What do you think of Life is a Lemon?
Well, I think it's a good riff. Number one, I do like that. There's some distraction. I know some of our listeners might get sick of hearing me talk about the drums and everything, but like that China cymbal in the chorus is so distracting. It's not a great drum part, I think it's a little bit of an exercise in how to take a cool riff and ruin it a little bit. Ruin might be a little heavy, but it doesn't have the adventure that probably that riff should have. And the other thing I would say is just from a lyrical perspective, and again, you and I, well documented, not lyric people, but like these lyrics are pretty dumb, and
yeah, sometimes it sort of gets in the way. I mean, I like that it's not cliche-ish and that it is a little bit tongue-in-cheeky and it's not taking itself too seriously, but also it can be a little too campy, right? And there's a lot of campiness with Meat Loaf music. I mean, there's no question.
Of course. Yeah.
But this is, I think if you if this is another band doing this song, you're probably jamming. You're probably like, man, this has got cool moments, cool groove. So it's kind of one of those deals. And I think we'll run into this a couple times on this record where you sort of have to strip the theatrics from it and just, it's almost like we did on the Milli Vanilli episode, like get rid of all the noise and just focus on the signal, of the album and what those moments are and what it's trying to do. It's signal versus noise, don't you think?
Yeah. Can't pay attention to the signal, you know?
Well, this was another single. This was another one of the Michael Bay directed videos. And this was one of the tracks that appeared on that 1981 Jim Steinman solo album, obviously a bit more modernized and certainly re-recorded and performed with the great Meat on vocals here. This is Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through.
I treasure your love. I never wanna lose it. You've been through the fires of hell, and I know you got the ashes to prove it. I treasure your love. I wanna show you.
I really like this song. You know, I think it's got a nice driving nature to it. I think it's got a really nice, simple progression, great vocal line. I think this is where some of the sort of choral backing vocals work, you know, and there's a lot of that. It's sort of the Todd Rundgren-esque thing that Jim Steinman liked to do. In fact, it's probably his voice. He did a lot of the backing vocals on this record. I haven't really heard the original. I'm not sure if you went back and listened to the original on the Jim Steinman record, but I think this one really works. I actually think it's a good track 3. I think it's a good single. It's certainly an ideal follow-up single. It's one of the shorter pieces on the album at, you know, almost 6 minutes. I've always kind of liked this song, Nub.
Yeah, it's a nice addition to the album for sure. Yeah, it drives along, suits Meat's voice very well. Still, I think from a, you know, composition perspective, it's got the Jim Steinman flourishes, but it doesn't really reach that, you know, grand pinnacle that his most notable work does. But it's a nice rock song, and I agree. I think it's a nice, you know, it's a worthy track 3 and a good addition to the album for sure.
It's definitely simple, you know, for Jim Steinman purposes. It's short and simple, and you know, I think that's nice after you get through the first 2 tracks, which take you on a little bit of a ride in different directions. To have something that's pretty straightforward and simple, I think really works. Track 4 is It Just Won't Quit. You got 4 on the floor there, you know, in terms of the drums, and keeps that chorus kind of moving along nicely. I think there's some cool layers here. Good instrumentation. It's a bit more straightforward for a Jim Steinman song, but good vocal. I think it's pretty trademark Steinman in a lot of ways in terms of the progression and in terms of sort of the sort of theatrical nature of it. But yeah, I think this one kind of works.
Yeah, it does. You know, big chorus is the key. And you start to get the vocal layers too that come in, because as strong as Meat Loaf's voice is, you know, so much of the sound on this album and Bad Outta Hell and Bad Outta Hell 3 is, you know, some of the background vocal layers that were coming in as well. So I think it works too. I do like the kind of big stomp behind it. It is interesting that aside from the opening track, this album is really dominated by much simpler ideas compared to Bad Outta Hell 1, which is essentially a prog rock album with all these twists and turns. It's like show tunes, basically, you know?
Right.
And you don't get that show tuney vibe on Bad Outta Hell 2. It's much more of a rock album. And to our conversation earlier, that was responding to the times, I think. You know, I'm not sure the show tune thing would have worked.
I think it's a really good point. This is a pretty, you know, driving rock record, which obviously, you know, to your exact point, in 1993, if you wanted to sell and you wanted to appeal to an audience that would take this in as teenagers and as, you know, those that are more into the grunge thing, you definitely needed that edge. I think they captured that well. I think it's a song that's an example of something that maybe isn't the, you know, most intricate, incredible song ever written, but well produced. And I think that you get that top to bottom here. Another sort of campy title here, which you get. They like the parentheses too, didn't they? Really always like to use those. Out of the Frying Pan and Into the Fire, track 5.
Open the
This definitely, I think, goes along the same idea of maybe something that was a little bit more Bad Outta Hell 1-ish.
Yeah, I agree.
You know? Yeah, in sort of the way that it moves and in sort of the, kind of majestic nature of it, but still a pretty stripped down rock song. It's 7 minutes 20. So again, you continue with these sort of long ideas. It's not the greatest song on the record, but it's got some cool moments and upbeat again in heart. This was kind of a driving record. This was something that, was upbeat, a lot of 4 on the floor, a lot of kind of hard charging stuff. And Meat Loaf's vocals, I think, on pretty much most of these tracks, including this one, kind of made it work.
The problem really gets down to you're about halfway through the album at this point, and some of that Jim Steinman lyrical irony, it just starts to get a little bit much, I mean, it's like, okay, out of the frying pan and into the fire, and I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. And it's like, okay, I get it, dude. You really like to do the play on words thing and, and be ironic and take sayings and mess with them. And, it's cool. But by the time an album sort of reaches a few songs of that, you're craving a little bit something different.
Well, I wish we could say that stops on the next track, but certainly this is one.
Yeah, it definitely does not.
With a bit of an embellished title. Now this one's very interesting. And this is the beginning of side 2, and it's probably sort of positioned as like the second real epic. And this was the third single and the third Michael Bay video, a song that I really think they thought had a lot of potential, a lot of upside. We'll touch on that in a second, but let's first hear a little bit of Objects in the Rearview Mirror May Appear Closer Than They Are.
But everything we tried was right. She used my body just like a bandage. She used my body just like a wound. I'll probably never know where she disappeared, but I can see her rising up out of the backseat now, just like an angel rising up from a tomb.
I don't know if you remember this, but at the concert, for some reason, I always remembered this, that Meat Loaf, he didn't really talk a lot, he wasn't really big into sort of the in-between song banter, probably because he was trying to catch his breath. This guy could sweat like you read about.
Oh, man.
Big sweaty guy up there,
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this, but before they played this song, he said he thought, I don't know why I remember this. He said he thought this was the best song Jim Steinman ever wrote. He said he thinks it's kind of the most special track on Bad Outta Hell 2 and one of the most, more special tracks that he and Jim ever worked on together. He was very complimentary and enthusiastic about this song. And
I got to say, I'm with the amount of Zima you drank that night, I'm surprised you remember anything.
Well, by that point, maybe it started to wear off. But sometimes with any album, and certainly with any composer, and I think this happens a lot in music, you can tell that there are these songs that just the band or the songwriter just love and spent a lot of time on and really put a lot of care into. And I think that's this, even more so than Anything for Love, which they knew was going to be the smash. But I feel like they really believed in this song. They really thought that this was going to be something big. You could tell how much Meat Loaf, just from the concert and from, the other commentary that he had about this track, this was one that they just really seemed to like. I think it's good. I don't think it's as good as they thought it was. I don't think it kind of hits the mark as sharply as certainly, it seemed like Jim Steinman thought and, Meat Loaf himself thought. It's a good start to side 2. I do like that there's sort of another epic 10 plus minute deal here, but I don't think it rises to the level of track 1. But you can tell, Nub, that they sure thought it was, and they sure put a lot of TLC into this song.
It's a little bit like the before mentioned Read 'Em and Weep in feel, but it's a little bit of the opposite. See, Read 'Em and Weep, whether it's the Meat Loaf version, but certainly the Barry Manilow version, it's got kind of a okay verse and then an amazing chorus. This is like the opposite. I think the verses here are really powerful, and you capture that Steinman Meat Loaf kind of magic. But then the chorus is really blah, and the objects in the rearview mirror vocal it's just, it doesn't really explode in any way. You know? So it's almost like a reverse dynamic against Read 'Em and Weep.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that, you know, the way that this, I think they liked, part of what they liked about this was the peaks and valleys. And I think the peaks really work and the valleys not so much, you know?
Yeah, that's well said, actually. Yeah, it's too many peaks and valleys too. You never quite get locked into a feel. You know, it just keeps going back and forth.
There's an edit of this song that's kind of better. I think it's like 5-6 minutes maybe, and I think it's a little bit more efficient. So we're gonna skip track 7 because it's a spoken word sort of thing from. Actually, I think it's Jim Steinman doing a spoken word called.
Yeah, what is
I don't know. It serves as kind of an intro to the next song, which repeats Wasted Youth. So I feel like it's almost kind of a prologue. But we'll skip that and get to track 8, which is Everything Louder Than Everything Else.
But it seems to me to the contrary of all the crap they're gonna put on the page. That a wasted youth is better by far than a wise and productive old age. A wasted youth.
This one feels probably as Bad Outta Hell 1 as anything on the album. I think in terms of kind of the group singing and some of the breakdowns, and, you know, has a little bit more of a, you know, sort of classic rock, you know, kind of late 70s feel to it, more so than a 1993 feel to it. At this point, I think you're starting to get a little repetitive. You know, you get to this point, it's like, okay, I think we've run this play before, you know, and it's 7.5 minutes. Now, there's some cool dynamics, you know, when it sort of breaks down there and cuts out and it's just the sort of guitar and the choral vocals. I mean, it's kind of neat, but you start to get the feeling here, especially after a lot of these long pieces where, you know, you're sort of getting to the end of the album, the last couple tracks, and it's like, have I heard this one already before? You know what I mean?
I can be honest with you. It's actually my second favorite song on the record.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, the throwback to the Wasted Youth thing might be part of it because it justifies the track that comes before it to have some kind of reference point. I like that it doesn't feel like it has to do the loud, quiet, loud, quiet, loud, quiet, loud thing.
Right.
It's got just a little bit more of a force to it, a little bit more of a fist pump thing. I can't remember if you played this at the show. Probably would have been a pretty effective live song. It's interesting. We see it differently in another way too. I don't really see this as Bad Outta Hell-ish. I see this more as like the true 90s version of Meat Loaf. You know, It almost feels like this is him and Jim to an extent, maybe trying to be a little grungy, you know, and not achieving it whatsoever. But it's kind of a blast off rocker more than anything that's like super theatric. And for that reason, I like it. It's actually, this is the track of the album that probably recaptures my attention as much as anything on the second half, for sure.
Well, we couldn't have more opposite takes on that one, buddy.
Yeah, for sure.
But hey, that's the beauty. That's the beauty of this. All right. The next track, we've really got 2 more left. And this one is Good Girls Go to Heaven, Bad Girls Go Everywhere.
This is a total T song. I have to guess that. I have to guess that this one is one of your favorites on the album.
It's good. I like it. I mean, again, you're 4 on the floor here, and that seems to be a common thread in a lot of the choruses, which make it hard driving and make it hooky and all that stuff. Yeah, I think this one's pretty good. You know, it's probably its top half. Like the driving nature of it, you know, and I think you get that a lot here where, again, the fist pumpy 4 on the floor stuff, I think kind of works in most cases. And you're getting toward the end of the album, and this gives you a little spark of energy. And yeah, I think it's a good, you know, if you're kind of considering this the second to last track, I think it provides a good spark.
top half for me too. What can be underrated in the whole kind of Meat Loaf sound, and certainly on this record, is the role of the piano. You know, there's not a lot of other rock and roll bands where the piano itself was so upfront. You know, in so many moments on Meat Loaf's music, the piano is way more out in front than the guitar, certainly the bass. You know, there's not a ton of synthesizer stuff out front. I'm sure there is in terms of background layers and things like that, but piano is such a key role. And it's Jim Steinman's chief instrument. I think that's, of course, what he writes on. So
sure.
That probably has something to do with it.
Well, Back Into Hell is track 10. It's sort of a weird instrumental. We're just going to skip that. And we're going to go to the final track, which was one that appeared on the original Jim Steinman solo album. And they utilized that to close out Bad Out of Hell 2 with Lost Boys and Golden Girls. And that's how she closes up. Obviously, something that's a bit more atmospheric and a bit more lovely to kind of wrap it up. I like the dynamics at the end of the album. Even the instrumental that sort of leads into this is just kind of strange and kind of cool. I think it kind of exits appropriately, you know, with the last 3 tracks in particular, doing what it needs to do and sort of ending with that, you know, kind of epilogue that Jim Steinman often like to do, since often, you know, he was really putting together musicals in a lot of ways, at least conceptually, more so than he was just tracks on an album. And you can kind of see what he was going for here on the last one.
Yeah, I do think the sequencing is a win on the album. You know, opens the right way, takes you on the journey through the middle and end, and it concludes in a way that is fitting. You wouldn't really be able to put this track on any other part of the album but the very end. So, you know, props to the sequencing. And I would say the same for the first Bad Out of Hell as well. It's part of the magic to it.
Well, it's episode 71. And, you know, I hate to admit when this happens, but Nubs actually had a really good idea recently. And that is to kind of change up what we previously called Did It Matter? And really ask what we thought is kind of he really thought, and I agreed, kind of a more important question, which we're going to go with from here on out. So all you hardcore fans out there, you're going to notice a little bit of a change. But instead of going with Did It Matter? The question we're going to ask really is, how did it hold up? Which I think is kind of what we ended up talking about for the most part anyway.
Yeah.
So Nubs, how did Bad Out of Hell 2 hold up for you?
Not particularly well. And I think that probably is part of the reason why it was popular, though. As mentioned earlier, I think that the fact that this album was an antithesis of everything that was going on with grunge and all this, the kind of dark energy of the early to mid 1990s, I think that played into why we're still talking about this album today. But that also plays into why it hasn't held up well. It was already outdated in 1993. And it's kind of severely outdated now. I do think what's fascinating about it is hearing the 90s production. And you mentioned it right off the top, kind of the 90s guitar sound. And, you know, all those elements with this artist who was last relevant in like 1978. That's an interesting thing to hear now in 2022. It doesn't mean it holds up, because it doesn't. You know, if you played this album for a younger listener, I don't think they would understand it at all. But you know what? There were lots of younger listeners in 1983 that didn't understand it either. And that was part of its charm. So, but overall, I would say no, I don't think it holds up. T, what do you think?
It's an interesting question on something like this, because I don't think the idea was for it to be super trendy or timely. I think that they made adjustments to make it certainly appeal to the 1993 audience, but they weren't trying to like have Meat Loaf gone grunge by any means. This is he and Jim Steinman doing what they do. So, you know, musically and theatrically, it's so original. I mean, you really don't hear a lot of things like this. You know, I don't know that it's something that needed to hold up necessarily because it's Meat Loaf, it's Jim Steinman, and they're always going to sort of run their play and do what they do. The original question, though, of how much does this album matter? I think it really mattered a lot in at a time period where things were starting to become a little bit formulaic commercially. And it was about, minimalism and, things that sort of had a darker, more angsty sort of tone to them. And for Meat Loaf to be not just taken seriously, which was an uphill battle for him at this time, but to basically kick the ass of a lot of this, commercially at least, a lot of this material that was out there that certainly took on something that was a bit more edgy with something that was grand and epic and long songs and lots of layering and lots of instrumentation to your point about the piano that really wasn't sort of happening much at this time. I think the album mattered a lot in showing everyone that there is a unique angle on what has commercial appeal and that there was enough nostalgia with the original Bat Out of Hell to where, you could come out with something that had good enough material on it. One just absolute smash, global smash single, and package it in a way that really kept this Bat Out of Hell tradition and this sort of Bat Out of Hell branding alive. And I think it did that. It pulled it off. And so whether it holds up or not, whether it sort of mattered in the grand scheme of things or not, I think you have to agree that they set out to do something pretty bold with a lot of headwinds, way more headwinds than tailwinds in pulling it off. And they sure did. It worked. It got it done. So let's answer that second question there, buddy. What's your final cut on Bat Out of Hell 2? Is it on the turntable, in the collection, collecting dust, or go into that for sale bin? Nubs, what do you got?
I go into the for sale bin, but I do think that I would do anything for love, what's the proper title? Anything for love, right?
The exact title is actually I'd do anything for love, parentheses, but I won't do that. Yeah, I'd. Yeah, they go with the
contraction.
Contraction. Right. Yeah.
I think that song should be on every 90s compilation. It's an extremely important song and one of the most entertaining songs of the 90s in all genres. So that song is, that song's a pinnacle. That song's important. The rest of the album, I do agree with everything you just said. I admire the fact that they stayed so true on certain elements and then kind of, enhance certain elements to try and be relevant to the time. It just didn't work for me entirely. I got to be honest with you, too. I mean, we kind of mentioned this. I'm not even a big fan of Bat Out of Hell 1. If I want music this adventurous, I'm probably going to go for something that's just a little less whimsical and more serious.
Yeah.
And even if I want something that's a little more on the absurd side, I'll go with like Frank Zappa.
I don't disagree with you, but it is incredible the way Bat Out of Hell 1 has held up.
Yeah.
There are anthems on that have just stood the test of time in a pretty incredible way. I mean, so
you go to any karaoke bar in the country and before the end of the night, somebody is singing Paradise by the Dashboard Light, probably very poorly.
Yeah,
but yeah, you're right. It's an iconic album. It's just not really for me. And therefore Bat Out of Hell 2 is not really for me either, but I do love the opening track. I really do. It's an important song of kind of you and I's childhood for sure. So yeah, T, where do you got it? Where's the final cut?
Yeah, I'm going to go collecting dust because, I do think that this was very important to its decade and to its time period. And, there are going to be plenty of collections where you probably don't listen to it that often, but you know what? You got it in there because so many, this sold 14 million. So many people own this album.
That is a stunning number. It is.
Absolutely. And, I think that, again, it was lofty to try and capitalize and pull off this sequel element of Bat Out of Hell, which was so beloved and so anthemic and still to this day is iconic. They did it. And that wasn't easy. That was a big hill to climb. I do think they leaned pretty hard on one song in particular to make that happen. But there are moments that are pretty sturdy here and moments that if you are able to take in the entire album, which isn't easy, it's not a particularly easy listen. It's long. You sort of have to commit to it a little bit. It's a bit of a commitment, but something that was lofty, something where nobody thought it had a chance. In fact, most people probably just thought it was kind of a joke, and they did it. And I think that there's something to that was really important to its decade, and probably important to the collections of a lot of people who maybe still have the CD laying around, or the cassette tape, since those are, cool again. So I'm going with Collecting Dust. All right, buddy. That's a wrap on the record. But before we wrap the episode, let's see what old Dolores has for us here. What do you think? What is in your head, Nubbins? Let's go.
First to be a track, the title track, in fact, from an album that is actually getting the reissue treatment here very soon. I'm looking forward to it. And that is the song Gold from the album The Gold Experience from probably my favorite Prince song.
Such a great song. So they're reissuing The Gold Experience?
Yeah, it's getting a vinyl release for Record Store Day. And then it's getting like a standard CD and maybe box set.
It's a great, it's a good Prince record. It's Endorphin Machine's great. Dolphin's a really good song. That's got Most Beautiful Girl in the World, I think, on it. That's a really good Prince record.
The 90s Prince is super overlooked.
Yeah.
Diamonds and Pearls is a great record. Gold Experience. The Symbol album, because that's also getting
with
reissue.
7 and the Morning Papers. Yeah. Very good.
I mean, great stuff. It's, I think unfortunately with Prince, everyone just turns to the hits and the 80s stuff. That 90s output is as creative and interesting as anything that came out in the decade. So yeah. That I love that song. That guitar solo that he rips at the end is just incredible.
Yeah, secondly, it's a great choice. Gold is a really special Prince song. Yeah.
For sure. Another special song here from the Money Man, Eddie Money. The summer's coming up and we don't have any money to open up Pine Knob Theater anymore, unfortunately.
Speaking of another show we went to at Pine Knob one year, but we weren't the drunk ones. It was Eddie Money was the one that was just absolutely bombed on
plastered
stage.
On stage for sure.
It was great.
But Take Me Home Tonight, which will be, probably coming to a karaoke bar near you.
Well, and we just lost Ronnie Spector. I don't know if that factored into your...
it did not.
Yeah.
That's a good call.
We just lost her, like a week or two ago. So,
yeah.
Okay.
And lastly, the little Bowie from Diamond Dogs, and that is the great 3-song Sweet Thing Candidate, Sweet Thing Reprise, one of my favorite Bowie moments. Yeah, that's what's, in my head. T, what's in your head?
Well, I've got one by The Doors, but this is off Full Circle. So this was one of the post Jim Morrison records in Vertilac, man. Oh,
yeah, it's great.
What a freaking jam. It's just so good. And, Manzarek just crushing it on the vocals. That post Jim stuff's really interesting and in most cases pretty cool.
Actually. Love those albums. Yeah.
Yeah. The second is from a film that we've talked about quite a bit, that being Rad, the BMX movie with Crew Jones and Bart Connor and, of course, the Reynolds twins and Lori Loughlin, who's now in jail, I think. Yes. And Adrian Balboa as Crew Jones's mom. It's a special film, great film. And John Farnham does some work on there, and I'm just going to go with Thunder in Your Heart, which is a great 80s song. And during the pinnacle, BMX race is where they play that jam.
The emotional climax of Rad.
It's a bit of a climax. Yeah, it's a bit of a climax. And thirdly, starting to think about the spring. Just, I think like tomorrow as we record this is going to be like a nice day here. It's going to be in the 60s and starting to think about some of those summer songs. And one of them for me is this old school rap track from the 80s by Rodney O, and it's called Everlasting Bass. So check that out. Nub, this was fun. I think, it's always good to do these episodes that are a bit timely when we lose the artist, and it was a bummer to lose Meat Loaf. It definitely impacted a lot of people throughout a wide range of ages, because, you know, you have people that were, you know, born in the 40s and 50s that, you know, really connected with the first Bat Out of Hell. Obviously, our generation really connected with the second one we talked about today. And, you know, he didn't stop. He went on and created some, you know, some successful work. Obviously did the Bat Out of Hell 3. And I think, you know, a guy that persevered and plowed through, and more people probably love Meat Loaf than not, you know, and it was fun to talk about, buddy.
Love the choice. Little trip down memory lane. And just remember, I would do anything for you, T, but I won't do that.
But what is that?
I'm never telling.
Ah, God, I thought maybe I'd get you. I thought maybe you'd tell us. Well, maybe in a future episode, you'll tell us what that is. But I don't think we're ever going to find out, because both Jim and Meat are gone. But you never know. Maybe they wrote it in a diary somewhere or something, you know, and we'll find out someday.
Wasn't it Bill Clinton who under oath said, "It depends on what your definition of is." It's like,
yeah, that's right.
It's like,
yeah,
it depends on what your definition of that.
Yeah.
is.
While he was blatantly lying to a grand jury. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And with that, we'll close the curtain on episode 71 here, talking about Meat Loaf's Bat Out of Hell 2. We will be back. I know we're due for a Q&A, so we might be, I don't know if we're going to do that episode, but we do have that coming up. And of course, we have episode 72 coming right up. So listen, be good, be proud, be strong, be an alpha. Don't be a victim, and just go out there and kick ass, because things are getting better, aren't they, Nub? Things are looking up. At least they're starting to. And we will see you next time for episode 72 here on Two Twins and an Album. Y'all take care now.
Two twins.
Well, that's about it. That's all we have. I hope it wasn't too disappointing. We will see you on tour. Until then, take it easy.